Hey guys, this is Mike. Sorry for the bad audio, but my microphone is not the best. Anyway, so today I'm going to go through the setup of Django plus HTMX and show you how to set up a basic CRUD website. In this example, it's going to show the list of cars, and then you have your model, the name of the car, and the year that the car was manufactured. So I mean, it could be any kind of data. I'm just putting cars. But this demo is very simple. It just kind of shows you the very basics of CRUD operation. You know, create, remove, update, delete, and then on top of that, we're going to do a little bit of HTMX, kind of like a single-page application. So HTMX will make a request to the backend of the Django. It's an optional thing, but it's very useful for quick updates to your data without refreshing the entire page. And on top of that, we're going to have a login mechanism, authentication mechanism, using Django-allauth package, which is very nice. It has tons of options that you can configure to have your users logging in, either through an internal database, like an internal user password, or through, for example, a Google AD or Microsoft AD or GitHub, or there's tons of other option providers that the package has. Anyway, so as you can see, the final app will kind of look like this. So you'll go your app. For example, this is a read-only for non-logged in users. If I log in with a certain account that I already registered, for example, I can put in, let's see, what's my login here? admin@admin.com. So here I'm logged in as an admin, and here I have a different menu which allows me to delete a record, edit a record through a HTMX call, or edit through a form, which is a standard Django update form. So we'll show kind of both ways of doing it. So for example, here, if I want to edit this record, this is adding a div, an HTML div element directly on the page. It's injecting it without refreshing this entire page. So for example, if I want to change the year to let's say 2002 or 2001, click submit, and then you can see here it updated the record. And then if I want to do the same thing using another method through a Django form, it reloads the whole page, and here it gives me an entire form. So if I do like 2006, for example, now you can see it's 2006. I can also, there's a couple of options here to sign out, to register. For example, if I'm a new user, if I want to sign up for an account, there's an option to do that. I can create an email address, a password, and then I can register a user. If I want to log in, for example, as a manager, so for example, somebody that can create new records. Let me just log in as a manager. So here I am, I'm logged in as a manager, and this is basically a Django group called managers. So you can define your users to be in different groups, and each group has different kind of role access to what they can do in your website. So for example, here my manager is able to add new records. So for example, if I want to make, let's say, a Chevy Nova, and the year, for example, let's do like 1989. Here it is, it just added a record. Anyway, so that's kind of a very simple website. Shows you basic database operations. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a Django application. So if you go to your path where you're going to store your project, make sure you have Django already installed. So you can do that by doing pip3 install Django. So make sure that that already has, it's installed on your system. Let me just double check. I should already have that, or maybe I don't. I do have it somewhere in my system. it should already, once you install Django, it's going to give you this this command, Django admin. So it looks like it's installed in my .local, probably through one of my Python environments. But anyway, so the way to do it is you would do pip install, pip3 install Django, and there it is. It's going to install it, and then once we have the Django admin, we're going to start a project called cars. So that's going to be just the overall kind of like the shell of the project. So once we do that, you're going to see a cars folder created. So if you go into cars, you'll see a cars folder, which is our main application, which are kind of a core application. And then this manage.py is Django creates that, so that's like kind of like your Django controller file. So you're going to be using that to create like other things like database migrations and all kinds of other things. Anyway, so let me go open up this folder, and you'll see what's inside of that file. So if open folder, come on, can't type today. There's my folder. And here's your cars directory that we just created. So as you can see, it creates a couple of things out of the box. These will be created by Django itself. The most important one we're going to look at is settings.py, which is your settings folder for this application. And this is all out of the box here. We're going to go down the list of all these settings later, and we're going to adjust it and add additional applications or libraries to it. So for example, Django-allauth or anything else. So before we do that, so each Django application has what's called apps inside of it. So for example, our application can have an app called rental car app. Let's say if we want to do car rentals, or if we want to do let's say finance app, if we want to finance the car, or depending on the business model. For this example, I'm just going to create a new app called main. It's just a generic kind of all-encompassing app. This is where pretty much all our logic and all our HTML templates, CSS, JavaScript, all this other stuff is going to be kept inside of this main folder. But just to keep in mind, like as your application grows, it's easier to split it up into different apps, which is going to be easier to manage because it's kind of like plug and play. So you can disable certain apps when you don't need them. You can you can add them. You can also get them from Django App Store. So a bunch of developers they create apps that you can just kind of integrate into your single Django project, and then you can just switch them on, and then you can use that functionality. So to create our main app, so what I would do is you would do manage.py, start app, main, and oh, hold on a second. Why is it not? Oh, okay. So let me do this. It's not recognizing manage.py, the Python script. So what I will do in this case is I'm going to use a virtual environment and then install all my Python packages into a virtual environment. So for that, I'm going to use pipenv, which is kind of like poetry or virtual environment. It's just a virtual environment manager. So I'm going to install Django-allauth as well. So it'll create a folder in my home directory and install all my packages here into the folder, and also create a pip file. This pip file has all the packages that I just installed listed. And what's cool is I can also add a scripts block. And in the scripts block, what I can do is I can tell it to do certain things. So for example, app equals python manage.py run server. So this will start my web server. All right, so now that I do have my virtual environment set up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do pipenv shell. I'm going to get into my virtual environment. And if you do pip freeze, you'll see all my packages that are installed automatically through those. When I installed these two packages, it pulls in all these other requirements. So I don't even have to worry about this. This is done all automatically. So these are all the packages you need in order to run this Django project. All right, so now that we're in here, I should be able to create my main application. And you can see here that it did create that. And here's where we're going to do probably like 90% of our work is inside this main application folder. Okay, so now that we're done, we need to create a migration. So migration is basically we're telling Django to create our database tables for us. In this case, we're going to use a SQL-like database to store all our data. It's just simple, and we don't have to worry about running a database server. It'll just create a SQL-like file locally. But for any advanced or large-scale projects, anything production-related, you'd want to use a production database like Postgres or MySQL or a MongoDB or whatever you use. But in this case, it's a simple demo. We're going to use SQLite. So what I'll do is I'm going to do manage.py, make migrations, and this will create a migration table. And you can see here under the migration folder, it creates this init.py. There's nothing there right now. When we run migrate, so we're going to do manage.py migrate, it creates out of the box kind of tables based on the settings that we chose initially. So it'll create, like, for example, authorization tables, sessions. These are kind of all internal Django tables that Django needs to reference when it runs. But we don't have to worry about this. This is all out of the box kind of vanilla Django stuff. As you can see here, it created a database. If I open that up, you can see kind of here, these are all the tables that it creates. So for example, this is the user. There's no users here right now. Permissions, groups, this is all vanilla Django stuff. So now that this is created, I'm going to create a super user, which is like kind of like the super admin user to manage everything and to log in into the admin portion of the website, which is a nice thing about Django. It gives you an admin console. So I'm going to do manage.py, create super user. So I'm going to give the username of admin. Email, I'm going to do admin@cars.com. It could be any valid email, or you can skip this entirely. Password, I'm going to give it a password. Make sure you have a good complex password for this, but anyway, we created that. Okay, so now another thing we need to do is to add our main application to our cars settings.py. So this is like the top project structure. We need to tell our Django project to register this main application. So under installed apps, you want to go down here and just add main and comma. That's it. That's all you got to do. And now Django knows to look in this folder and pick up anything from that folder. Okay, now let's run our website. So to do that, I can either do manage.py run server. And what this will do is it'll, oh, I do have a port already running. Let me try that again. I already had that port up on my desktop. I just killed it. So I'm going to try running it again. So now you can see it's running it on localhost port 8000. So if you go to localhost port 8000, this is just vanilla Django splash page, right? So you can see that it's installed, everything's working. All right, so we're good here. Now what we can also do, if you go to /admin, I'm going to log in as my admin super user that I just created. And you can see here, there's not much here. It's just users and groups, but we're going to add more stuff to this later. And under users, you can see I do have one of my super user account already here, and you can also add additional users here. Okay, now that we have the main site, main site is ready, what we're going to do is create what's called a model to store our cars information. And the way we're going to do that, we're going to go under main, and under models.py, there's nothing here right now. but what we're going to do is create a cars model. So a model is just basically a representation of your database table. So instead of using like SQL create table, name equals character, or year equals int or whatever, we're going to create a Python class. So we're just going to create a class called cars models.model, and then here we're going to have a couple of fields. We're going to have make of the car, and this is going to be models.character field. We're going to say the max length, like the maximum number of characters the users can put in. You can give it some number, 30 is fine. And we want it to be a DB index, so we want it to the Django ORM, which is Django database query language, to use an index on this field. It'll make lookups much faster. Model is the same thing. Car field, same thing with max length. Give it a 30. This is also a DB index as well. And then year, this is the year of the car was made. This one's going to be an integer field. And then blank equals true, so this will be an optional. So if you don't have a year, you can still create a record. And null equals true. So you can save it a blank or null. And also we're going to add what's called a constraint. So for example, we don't want to create a record for the same car, right? We don't want, like, say, Toyota Corolla to be inserted twice into the database. We only want one Toyota Corolla. So we need a way to somehow limit the entry into this database according to the type of data you put into a combination of fields. So we're going to say constraints, constraints equals models.unique constraint, and then we're going to give it a fields array or list. We're going to say fields equals make and model. So we're saying use this combination of these two fields to create a constraint on your on your new records. I'm going to give this name. Name of this constraint is going to be unique attribute. And then we also want to order the data when we return it from a search by certain fields. So we want to order it by make. So we want to order it alphabetically by make, and then also order it by model. Okay. So this is pretty much all you need to do to create a table in your database right now. Let me just double check with this error. It's giving me some error about invalid attribute order. Oh, it's not order, it's ordering. So ordering equals make and model. Okay, so that looks good. All right, so this is set up. Let's see how we're going to create this table now. So to create this table, we're going to run our migration again. So we're going to do manage.py. Make migrations. So you can see here it created a migration 001 initial.py, and it created a new model with a new constraint, and now we're going to do migrate. Migrate will actually create the table in your SQLite database. So there it is. So if I open up my SQLite, let me reopen it. There it is. You can see the new table is created. It's called main_cars. And you can see here it creates ID field automatically. That's our primary key. You can see the little key over here. Then the 3 fields, and it creates a constraint based on make and model. So it looks pretty good right now. Okay, so now that we have our database set up and our models, so models you can think of as like table definitions, right? Your database tables. Now what I want to do is create what's called a form. A form is going to be based off a model, except that with forms we can do additional things like type checking. We want to make sure that certain things are properly inserted into the database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file called forms.py. And in here I'm going to import forms. So from Django import forms. I'm also going to do, I can also add certain things like validators. Let's say, for example, for the year field, the year of the car, I only want numbers, right? So there's several ways to do it. We can either do an integer field, but we can also add a regex validator to make sure if anybody puts in a character like ABC into that field, it's going to get rejected by the form. So you don't need to use any JavaScript validators and any of that messy stuff. Django does it for you, so that's the beauty of Django. It's just a lot of stuff is just out of the box completely, and it's very simple to implement. So you can look up the validators on their website, on the Django website. There's tons of validators, but I'm going to use a common one called regex validator. And also for models, .models, I'm going to import cars class. So I'm going to define my numeric, my regex validator for numeric entry. So I'm going to say numeric equals regex validator, and I'm going to give it a raw regex of numbers only. So I'm going to say 0 through 9. So any character 0 through 9, star dollar up to the end. So I want everything inside of that field to be numeric, and if it's not, it's going to throw an error. Now I'm going to create a cars form class. That's what's going to be going into our template, HTML template. Forms.model form. That means that I'm going to, it's binding to that model that we created earlier. So I'm going to say make equals forms.character field required. And by the way, I'm just barely touching the basics here. This is basic stuff, but Django has tons of other options that you can do with these forms that for the sake of time I'm just not going to go into, but just to get you started on a basic website, this should be enough. I can give it a max length, same thing with model. And these are going to be required equals true, meaning like we can't submit a new record unless these two fields are filled out. We need these two fields to be in there. And same thing for year. We can do forms.integer field. We do want this one. We could put either yes or no. I'm going to put true just because I don't want to submit a record with empty year. Also, you can give it a minimum and maximum value. So for example, if I only want cars from, let's say, 1980 to, let's say, 2024. I don't want cars from 1950s, for example, right? That's a constraint you can just put right here. So you can say minimum value 1980, maximum value, let's say, 2024. And also I want to do a validator, and this is like overkill, but just to show you what you can do, you can say numeric. So this numeric variable maps to this regex validator. So anytime you submit a record, it'll validate against this regex. And then I'm going to do class meta, whatever you call it. This is just kind of an internal Django frame of reference. So you're going to say it's binding to this class called cars, to this model called cars. And fields, we want all fields. Underscore, all underscore. Double underscore, all double underscore. Okay, so this form is ready. Let's see. So we created the model, we created the forms. Now the only other thing is we want to register our car model inside of our admin view. So if you open up admin.py, there's nothing there right now. So we want to show the cars model in our admin console. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, I'm going to register that model. So I'm going to say from models, import cars. And I'm going to say @admin.register cars. That's a decorator. And I'm going to say class cars admin, admin.model admin. And then I want to display in that admin console, I want to display which fields do I want to display. So I'm going to say list display equals, and then this is a tuple, so I'm going to say make model, and then year. Okay, so now that we did that, let's go to our admin console, run server. Oh, by the way, so another way to run it, if you saw earlier, in our pip file, I created that script block over here. And this does the same thing, so if you say pip and run, and then the name of your script, so I'm going to say pip and run app, it's the same thing, right? So it's the same as manage.py run server. It doesn't matter how you run it, but this is just convenient as well. All right, so if I go here, refresh that, this is still our default landing page. So if I go to admin/admin, you can see here our cars, it adds an extra S, but it's basically our cars. And what's cool here is you can add data directly, right? So if I want to say add, let's say, you know, Honda Accord, let's say if I put some crazy number, right, like that's outside of our range, let's say 1950. If you try to save that, it adds it, but because we didn't use a form, it's allowed to add that number. Once we start using the form on our template, it'll forbid you from entering an invalid year. So now that we have one record, we can add another record. Let's say, I don't know, what's a good car? I don't know any cars. Lexus RX 500. I don't even know if that's a valid, if it's an actual car, but whatever. 1980, save. Okay, so now we have two cars here. We have two records. Okay. So we have a little bit of data in there. So now let's go to create our template, HTML template that's going to display these cars to the viewer. Okay, to create our templates, what I'm going to do is under cars, I'm going to create a new folder called, actually, sorry, not under cars, under main. We're working inside the main app. So I'm going to create a new folder called templates. And I'm also going to create a, I guess, you know, if for any large website, you would also create a folder called static. So for example, under the static, you can say something like create new folder called CSS. You can create a new folder called JS if you're adding additional JavaScript, things like that. We're going to skip this in this tutorial just because we're not really doing anything with CSS or making it pretty. This is just bare bones just to show you the mechanics of database operations. So I'm going to leave this for now. We're just going to focus on the templates part. And here I'm going to create a new file called index.html. That's going to show the user all our data, right? So it'll be very simple. So here we're going to say HTML. I'm going to give it a title called Cars App. Head. And then also body. Inside the body, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create like a link to the main page for the user. Obviously, if it's a nice website, we want to create sort of a navigation bar, but this is very simple. So I'm going to say, I'm not going to use a direct link. I'm just going to use what's called a Django URL keyword. And for that, I'm going to say URL. So these are called jinja variables. So Django uses a jinja templating. And the URL is called index. So we're going to create that URL in a little bit. But just to kind of show you how to create links in Django. I'm going to say my car app. Okay, so here we have that. And then here, let's create, okay, let's save that for now. So we just have a very basic index HTML. Let's go to our views. Views is going to be kind of giving out all the data to your templates. So this is kind of like the main driver of your templates. So if you open up views, we're going to say from Django shortcuts, import render, and also redirect. These are various kind of request handlers. let me see, what else do we need? We want from forms, we want to import our cars form, and also from models, import cars model. You know what I'm also going to do, I forgot to add this in earlier, I'm going to install a package called Laguru. It's for logging. You can log with standard Python. I like this package because logging is just very simple. I don't need to configure it. So I'm going to do pipenv install Laguru. It'll install the package, and then all we need to do once it installs it is from Laguru import logger. Now we can do logging to standard out or to a file. It's very nice logger. Okay, so now that we have this, let's create our index route. So this is to show the user what kind of data we have. So we're going to do diff function index request. That's the incoming request. And we're going to give it a comment saying that this will display cars data to the user, right? So we'll say, for example, if request method equals post. So that's when somebody's submitting to create a new car. We're going to say form equals cars form request dot post. So we're saying is populate this form with the data coming in from the request. So if I submit a new request for a new car, make, model, year, populate this form directly with this request variables. So it just makes it very simple to create data into your form, and basically from your form into your table. So the form is kind of like a staging area before the data comes into your database table. Then we're going to say if form.isValid, so this is a function. Django checks to make sure that your form is correct. We're going to say form.save, commit equals true. So basically create the record. Later on we'll add error handling. So if the form is not valid, what should we do, right? Let's say I put in some bad data. Right now we don't really have that. It's not going to do anything, but we can also add some stuff like messages to the user. Hey, your year is incorrect. Hey, your data is incorrect. Go back and fix it, that kind of stuff. I'm just going to leave it for now so it's simple. Okay, so if the request method post, but if not, then we're going to do this. Form equals cars form. Create a new form object. And here we're going to do a query set. So we're going to query our database for any existing car record. So we're going to say cars QS or cars query set equals cars objects dot all order by ID. So we're just telling Django, hey, if you have any cars in your database, give me a query set object of all those records. And that's what we're going to use to display in our template. And then we're going to create an object called contacts. You can call it anything you want. You don't have to call it contacts. But it's basically what we're feeding to that HTML template. So we're going to say form is form. We're going to feed back that form to the HTML. We're going to say cars QS equals cars QS query set. And then here we're going to return, we're going to render an HTML form. So we're going to say return request, render this HTML page, and also give it some data. So this context is the data you're feeding back to this HTML page. Okay, that's it. That's all we have for now. Now the final thing is, so this this function here handles your get and post. So if somebody accesses your HTML page, it'll return all the cars, right? So that's what we want to see. We just want to see what cars do we have in the database for now. If you click on this database, right, you'll see the if you see the cars, you can see the cars we created earlier in our admin panel. So that we do have some data there now, so it should return that data to this HTML page. Okay, so now what we need to do is create a file called urls.py. So under main folder, create a new file called urls.py. that's our routing. We're telling Django how to serve our functions, our view.py functions. So I'm going to say from Django.urls import path, comma, include from Django.views.generic import. Actually, no, we don't need this for now. I'm just going to leave this. I think that's all we need for now. We just need the path and include. Okay. And then from this directory, we're going to import views. So it'll import anything in your views.py. It'll import this index function. Okay. And then here we're going to define an object called your URL patterns. And it's just a list of routes that we're giving it. So for example, if the path is like this, if there is no path, if it's just like, for example, localhost port 8000, then we know we need the index route, like the basic home route. So we're going to say views.index, and we have to give it a name. So this route is called index route. Very simple. Okay, and then so we have this main app routes defined. We just need to tell the cars project to include these URLs down here, because you can notice the cars project also has a urls.py. So this is the top level URLs. We need to tell this guy here to also include all the URLs in here. We can put these in the top one as well, but it's just not a good practice because you want to break up your logic, your business logic, into your applications. So if you go back to this cars urls.py, we want to tell it to include the other routes. So here we're going to say from main import views, and then here we're just going to add a new line called path empty string. We're going to include main.urls. Path and comma include. It's missing that keyword here. So from Django URLs import path comma include, and then here we're including main app dot URLs. So that's it. This one's ready to go. Okay, let's see what it looks like. So let's run our server. Open up the blank website. And you can see it has my car app, right? It's got that link that we did, and if you click on the link, it goes back to itself. But there's no data yet, right? So because our HTML template does not have the data yet. So let's go back to our template. Here we're going to include a query set that we're passing from the view. So this view right here, it searches all our cars and generates a query set object. And then now it serves it into the template, in index.html template. Okay, so to include the view, let's open this up, and we're going to cycle through that query set. So we're going to say for row in cars underscore query set. This is a jinja template here. It's kind of like Python logic inside of HTML templates. We're going to say, for example, row.id, that's the database ID. We can say row.make, the car make, row.model, row.year. And then we need to close this for loop because we opened up a for loop over here. We need to close it, and the way we do it is we say end for. It's just basic Jinja logic. That's it. We save this file, and now our query set is going to show up on the template. So if I refresh that, you can see here there's our data, right? We can clean it up a little bit by adding a line break, so it's easier to look at. So if you do BR here, standard line break, there's our data, right? It looks ugly, but it's working. So you can see all our data here. Okay, now that we have this data, I'm going to just style it a little bit nicer so it looks a little nicer on the table. So instead of just doing a plain string, I'm just going to add a table to display the data. So I'm going to add a CSS style. So I'm going to say style. And you could do this with any kind of CSS framework like Bootstrap or Tailwind or whatever, but I'm just going to do a very basic one. So I'm going to say anything with table. I want to have a border on that table, so I'm going to say border 1 pixel solid, and I'm going to create a new class called warning class. That's for our errors, to show like in warning. So I'm going to give it some color like yellow or something like that, and it's going to be bold text. All right, so that's our style. It's very simple. Just keep it simple. And then let's see. So we have our link here. Also, let's see. So instead of doing this, instead of just doing like a dash and then the text, I'm going to create a table here to display our card data. So I'm going to add a line break. Let's create a table. Give it a width. Let's say 600 pixels. And then for each row in that data, we're going to create a new table row. I'm going to give it an ID, so I'll show you why. That's for our HTMX. And see how I can create the ID of the element to be dynamic. So this is going to have row underscore 1, row underscore 2. So I'm just feeding that into the logic. Okay, so we have our table row, and under table row I'm going to create a table cell, and here I'm going to say row.id, and the same thing I'm going to do for all the other fields. So instead of ID, I'm going to say make, I'm going to say model, and then same thing with a year. Simple 3 fields. Okay. And then we close that. Let me delete this one here. We don't need that. I'm just going to create end of tr, close the tr, and then finally I'm going to close the table as well. Let's see what it looks like now. So that looks much better, right? So we do have it's displaying data nicely. So now that we do have this is read-only, right? We can only read only. Now let's add a feature to delete one of these records. So how do we do that? We can use standard Django forms to delete it, but I want to show you how to do it using HTMX. HTMX is a nice library if you haven't checked it out. It has tons of options. So it's basically it's kind of like if you need to use JavaScript or an AJAX, so like it's asynchronous calls to the backend and then regenerate your front end. It does it seamlessly for you, and it's very simple to use. So it's basically you're just embedding HTMX calls into your HTML elements. For example, here's a button element, and here we're going to say when you click on the button, make a post request to some route, and then display the output to some target. So for example, sorry, my throat's killing me. It could be an ID or a class. So we're going to do that right now. I'm going to create a new button here called delete button. So I'm going to say table data, and I'm going to say button. Type equals button. I'm going to give it a red color of this button just because it's delete, we want it to be like red. Could be anything, but whatever, I'm just going with red. I'm going to give it an idea of delete button. I'm going to pass some data to the backend, so I'm going to say car ID equals row ID. So Django will know which row to delete based on the database ID. I'm going to say HX get, so make a get request. And here again, I'm using the URL parameter like we used here. It's a route. We're calling a specific route. And the route is called delete. And I'm also passing a variable called car ID equals row ID. So I'm saying delete car ID that has this row ID from the query set. So remember, we have the row here from the query set. It's basically like a list. It'll list through the elements of an array. And that's it, and we're going to close that. We're going to say target. Target is where to return the output of that backend call. So this function is going to return a message saying, okay, I deleted your car. Where do you want that output to be on this HTML template in index.html, right? So I'm going to say hx target equals row underscore row ID, row.id. And then we can also do what's called a confirmation. Because this is a delete button, we want to ask the user, hey, are you sure you want to delete this, right? Because you're deleting data. So we'll say hx confirm, are you sure you want to delete row.make, row.model, row.year. Are you sure you want to delete this record? Okay. And then we're going to close this button element. And then we're going to say delete. That's going to be on the button. Okay, and I'm going to close this TD. So here it's very simple. We just have a button. When you click it, it calls a route, delete route. It passes the car ID to the route, and then Django does the rest. It'll delete it and send some sort of an output text message saying, hey, I deleted it. And that message is going to go to this target row ID in this. Remember, we did that here, right here, row ID. It'll go right in here. It'll replace this row with a message from your backend. So this won't work right now because this route doesn't exist yet. So we need to create that route. So first we go to views.py. We're going to create a new function called def delete request. So there's going to be two variables. It's going to be request, but there's also going to be another one called car ID. That's what we're passing from that HTMX call. I'm going to give it a doc string or a comment. Delete a row. So we're going to do try and accept. So that's always a good practice. You want to do a try accept to catch any errors. So we're going to say row equals cars objects.get. And this, by the way, is Django query language. It's kind of like a Django syntax to query your database. So you could use raw SQL, but this is obviously much nicer and easier. So we're just going to find any records where ID equals car ID. So for example, if car ID equals 5, find me all the records where ID equals 5. And then once we find it, we want to do row delete that record. If, for example, that row does not exist, if it's not in the database, if it does not exist, we want to pass, we want to do nothing. It doesn't exist, right? So we don't need to delete anything. So now that we deleted it, we want to return some sort of a message. So we're going to say return HTTP response. So this is a standard Django response. You could do JSON response. You could do, there's a bunch of responses. You could look at the docs, but we're going to use a very basic HTTP response. Sorry. We're going to say div class equals warning. That's our CSS class we created over here. That's to give it like kind of yellow color. And we're going to say, hey, we deleted the record. Deleted car ID, and then close the div. So it's just basically, oh, we need to import this HTTP response. So I need to go back up here. I need to add that from Django dot HTTP import HTTP response. So this will basically send this string back, this div block, and it'll replace that on your HTML page. And then one final thing we need to do, we need to, anytime you create a new view function, we need to update our routes, right? So we need to tell Django this is a route now. So we go back to URLs, and here we're going to create a new route called delete. So we're going to say path, delete, and then here we're going to say int car ID. So you're telling it what kind of variable type it is. So it's always going to be an integer because IDs are always integers. You're going to say views.delete, and we're going to give it a name equals delete. All right, so this thing is set. So let's refresh our car app. Cool. So now you see for each row you have a delete button. So let's delete the first row, right? So once we click this button, HTMX will make a call to our backend to our through this route. It'll pass the car ID variable, and from there our function here will take that car ID variable, search for a record that has that variable that matches that, and then delete it. Once it deletes it, it'll send back a div object into our template saying that it's been deleted. So it's all instantaneous. What's cool is that this whole page doesn't get refreshed completely, just this one row will get refreshed. So it's, you know, it doesn't seem like a lot now, but imagine you have like 10,000 records on your page. So now you got to delete one. Instead of refreshing the entire page, the entire 10,000 records, only one of these things will get updated. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and that did not do anything. Why did it not do anything? Let me take a look. Oh, you know what I forgot to add? I forgot to add the HTMX library. So we need to import the HTMX JavaScript to our template. So to do that, if you open up index.html, if you go to the bottom, before the body, end of the body tag, so we're going to do script source equals, and then you can just give it a path to where HTMX is hosted. You can look that up on the HTMX website, like how to add it to your project. I'm going to give it like the latest version. Today is what, October 25th, 2023. So now your website is going to have HTMX. One other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a block to add cross-reference tokens to any HTMX requests from your page. That's going to help cut down on forgeries, cross-site requests. You can read more about CSRF protection on the Django website, but this basically says anything coming from HTMX from within your website is okay, and Django will trust it. So I'm going to say document.body.add event listener. I'm going to say HTMX config request. By the way, all the stuff is on the GitHub repo, so you don't need to worry about typing all this. But just so you understand what we're doing is just we're adding cross-site forgery request protection, which is very important for security of the website. Event detail.header. So we're going to insert an CSRF token. I can't even pronounce it. We're going to insert a token to Django backend saying, hey, this is allowed. This is a legit request. CSRF token equals, and then this is a Django variable. So anytime you generate your template gets displayed. Django inserts a CSRF token. So anything with these double mustache bars here, that means it's Django. It's a Django variable. Okay, so we added that. We just need to close the script. All right, we're good to go. So now you have HTMX coming through on your template. Let's refresh this page. Click delete. Are you sure you want, that's HTMX doing this now. Are you sure you want to delete this record? All right, click OK. And there it is. So as you can see, the whole page was not refreshed. Just one record was refreshed. And that's coming from the delete view. There it is. That's the very simple way to do a delete. Let's say delete another one, right? Both of our cars are deleted. If you go to My App, refresh this page, there should be nothing there. See, there's no data. We deleted all our data. Okay, now the data is deleted. Let's add a new form to this template in order to create a record. So now that we deleted it, we want to also create a record. So let's go back here. We're going to create a new form. We're going to say new record. And then here we're going to use a standard form. We're going to say form action equals URL index. So because our index view can handle post requests, we're going to say method equals post. And this is a very simple form. We're going to add a CSRF token. You want to add this to any form because once the form is submitted, the way HTTP works, there's a bunch of headers in the HTTP request. So what this does is injects the Django cross-site token, cross-site reference token into your header, HTTP call header. Here what's cool is I don't need to type out the entire form like make, model, year. I can just say form as table. So Django will create the form for you, not from form. Okay, and then we also want to do a submit button. So we're going to say input type equals submit, value equals submit, and then close the form. Okay, so what this does is if you go back to your views.py, you go to your index. So remember we said the form equals cars form, so it knows that form as table is just going to take this cars form, whatever fields are in there, and it's going to generate an entire form for you on the template. So it just takes that cars form and just generates that for you. So if we refresh that app, you can see here it just generated a form for us, right? It's really nice. We don't need to type anything manually. It just does it automatically. Okay, so now let's try to create a new record. Let's say Honda Odyssey. Year is, let's try 1950, right? So this should be an invalid year because remember under forms, we have a min value and a max value. So our proper value should be between these years ranges, 1980 and 2024. So if we put 1950, it should get rejected, right? If I click submit, see this is our forms doing all that work for us. It checks it, make sure all the data is clean coming in, right? So obviously I cannot put anything in there. What if you put it like, I can't even put like ABC in here. It can only be numbers because it's an integer field. Let's put 1982. That should be valid, right? Let's submit that. There it is. See, it returns the page with a new record. Let's create a new one called Mazda. I don't know what's a good Mazda. Some Mazda. I don't know any Mazda models, but whatever. Let's give it 1999. Okay, so now we have 2 records, and you can see the ID is increasing, the database ID. If we delete this one, right, works as well. Now we have one record. So there's your create functionality and delete functionality. Now that we have that, let's add an edit functionality. So let's say we have this record. I want to update the model name. Let's call it Mazda. I don't know. Mazda. Give it. I don't know what's a good Mazda name. Whatever. I'll just come up with something. So here we want to add a new button called Edit, right? And then we want to edit this form, this record. Okay, to do that, let's add a new button. We could actually do it with HTMX as well, so I'll show you how to do that. An edit button. So right below the delete button, let's add a new button called edit. So we're going to say button type equals button. Give it an ID. We don't really need to, but I like to give IDs to all the elements so we know what to reference. Edit form button, car ID equals row ID. HX get, so we're going to do a get request, and then we're going to give the route where this request is going to. We're going to say URL edit underscore form. We're going to say car ID equals row ID. And the target is going to be a new element called response. So we're going to create that. So this is where the response from that route is going to go to. I'm going to close that. Edit via Django form. So we're going to do two ways of editing a record. One through standard vanilla Django, kind of like the basic edit, and we're going to do one through HTMX. So even though we are using HTMX here to make a request, I'll show you another way to do it directly without using Django forms. So I'm going to close this button. Okay, and then I also need to create a new element called response. That's where this is going to output to. So I'm going to create a new div. Response. So any kind of response from our backend is going to go here. It'll basically, once our backend says like, hey, I edited your record, it's going to input a message here. Hey, I edited your record. It'll just insert this message in between these div tags. It's kind of like our catch area where we catch our messages. Okay, so now we need to create this view, right? So again, we'll go to views, create a new function called def edit form. I'm going to do request and then also car ID. Just kind of like delete, but instead of deleting, we're going to be editing a record. Give it an doc strings, edit a row via form submit. And we're going to select this row. So it's going to be cars objects dot get ID equals car ID. So it'll search for that row. We're going to say if request method equals get. If it's a get request, form equals cars form, instance equals row. So populate if it's just a get request, populate the form with the data from this lookup. So find all the data, let's say our Mazda record, pull that out, and populate our form with that data. I'm going to say context equals form. I'm going to say form, which is our cars form, and also car ID equals car ID. That's our context, and then we're going to return render. We're going to render our HTML. We're actually going to edit we're going to create a new template called edit.html, and then context. If request method equals post, if we do have a row, if there is an actual data to be edited, we're going to say form equals cars form, request.post, instance equals row. So we're going to take data coming in from that post request. If the edited form is valid, we're going to save it. So if I make an update to my car record, we're going to save it to the database. And then we're also going to pass the form object. And then I'm just going to redirect back to the index view. So just show that index page again with the updated data from our edit that we just did. Okay, so this is ready to go. We just need to add a route to this. So once again, I need to create a route. You go to URLs. And this is just like we did with the delete. We're going to create a new path. It's going to be edit form, and also we need to pass that car ID. So it's going to be again int car ID. And here we're going to tell it to use the views dot edit form. Name equals edit form. Okay, so the view is ready. So everything is ready. We just need to create an edit.html file. That's where we're going to be kind of editing stuff, right? So create a new file called edit.html. I'm going to give it a nice little background color. So I'm going to say style background color. Just going to give it some random color. And then I'm going to say editing a car record via form submit. This HTML is coming from edit.html page via form submit, just so you understand where this is coming from. And a break. Line break, and I'm going to say form action equals URL edit form, and I'm going to give it a car ID as well. So car ID equals car ID. And then I also need a method, so I'm going to say method equals post. And again, I'm going to put that token in here, CSRF token. And then here I'm going to do form as table. So this is going to be the cars form, and it's just going to basically show you the data that we have. So once we do a get call, it'll return the data of that car. It'll display it on that edit.html, and once we click save here, so input type save, submit, value equals submit or save, we can say save, and then close the form. Once we click save, it'll do a post request. So you can see the post request is going to be over here in this line. It's going to validate whether your new updated data is correct, and then it'll save the data and then just redirect it back to the index. All right, so this guy should be ready. Let's go back here, refresh that, and here we have our new button. So now let's edit this row, right? Click on that. It inserts this form. So it inserts that. This is the edit.html file. It inserts that into that response variable, and you can see here it gives me options to edit. So let's call it model 123, whatever. I don't know Mazdas. So I'm just going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, right? I'm going to save that. There it is. See that? It updated the model. If I want to update the year, it's the same thing. Let's give it like crazy year, 2100, right? It should break, right? It should not work. There it is. It's not working. If I give it a year within the range, it'll save it. Boom. So it's very simple. So that's a way to edit your records. And I'm just going to give you another way to do it. not using the Django forms. So we can use it directly through HTMX. Now the only thing is you would need to do some type checking by yourself, because keep in mind when you do it through this way, it uses the form element, right? So it uses this element here, and it's going to check against all these validators. If you do it without using this form, you don't have those checks enabled, so you'll be able to submit any kind of data, so you would need to make sure your data is clean. So I'm just going to create a new view called edit with HTMX, just to kind of give you an idea how it would work. And everything's going to be pretty much the same. You have your request on your car ID, edits a row via HTMX post request. Kind of show you kind of different ways of doing it. Oh, just to kind of show you the logger, right? We haven't used the logger at all, so I'm going to say logger warning, editing with HTMX. You'll see the logger output once we hit this route, this function. So here I'm going to say if request equals get. Try, same thing, we do row equals search for that object. If it does not exist, we could either do a pass, like meaning don't do anything, or we can raise an error. If you want to be strict about your editing, right? If you don't want to make sure, like if somebody tries to edit a non-existing record, which shouldn't happen anyway, but you can do all kinds of checks here. Okay, so here what we're going to do is we're going to return, and instead of, so the difference between these two, right? So on a get, it returns a form, a car's form, right? It generates a form for you, which is very easy. Here, instead of generating a form, we're going to just insert a form directly through a HTTP response. So this looks really messy, but all I'm doing is I'm just adding a direct HTML insertion. So I'm kind of bypassing Django here. I'm going to give it a different background, so I'm going to say background color. Okay. And then here I'm going to do a break, so we have multiple lines, so it's easier to read. I'm going to say H2 edit car record with HTMX. And here I'm going to say this HTML div is coming from edit HTMX function in views.py. Okay, now I'm going to add those fields. So you see there's a lot more manual work because I have to manually generate all that data, right? The form is not doing it for me. I'm using direct HTML. So I'm going to say make, and then I'm going to create a form element. Input type text, name equals make, ID equals make, value equals row.make. So row is coming from here, from that lookup, right? So it's and I'm going to do the same thing for model and year. and basically I'm just recreating our form just manually. That's all I'm doing. Okay, so this is good, and now I want to add a save button. And what the trick is, I'm going to add an HTMX button here, because I want to do an HTMX post back to the same function. So instead of get, I want to do a post directly from here. So I'm going to say input type button HX post, and then I'm going to give it a route. So I'm going to say edit HTMX. So I'm going to give it this function itself slash car underscore ID. I'm going to say HX target equals row underscore car ID. So I'm going to replace that row with the data coming from this function. HX include make model year. I'm going to include all that data in my output. Value equals save. Okay, this should be ready to go. I'm just going to close my div and add a line break. Okay, so this looks really messy, but all I'm doing is I'm just generating a form on the fly. That's all I'm doing. So it's very handy if you want to do something custom or for like quick changes. You can just generate, you can generate HTML in your template directly this way. Like, see, I'm generating an HTMX button directly. So I'm just inserting it into here, basically. All right, so this is for the get. Now, for the post, that's when we save the edited data. I'm going to say row equals cars objects.get ID equals car ID. Row.model equals request.post. So here we're saying find me a row with that car and update the model from your post, from your updated form. So it'll take whatever's coming from the post request, get the value of the model, and update the database value with that model. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other fields, right? I'm going to do it for year and also for make. Done. Okay. And then I'm going to save this record. So save the updated data. I'm also going to add a out-of-the-box Django messages. So Django has this message framework, so you can pass back to your templates. I'm going to say messages success request. Actually, I need to import my messages. I need to go back over the top. And from Django.contrib import messages. So you can read up on the messages framework, but basically it's a quick way to pass success or error messages to your template. Okay, so I'm just going to say that this has been updated. Okay, and then I'm going to redirect to index. So return redirect index. Okay, so this is good. This is ready to go. I just need to add a route. Did we add a route phrase? We did not. So I'm going to add a route for this HTMX route. So it'll be just like this route, the edit form one, except it'll be just a little bit different. So I'm going to say edit underscore HTMX. And everything else is going to be the same, except for here it's going to be HTMX, and the name is going to be different. I just need to add a comma here. Okay. So this is good. Let's go back to our index HTML. So that's the first edit button that we created earlier. We just need to create a new one called edit with HTMX. So everything is going to be the same. So I can just copy this block and just adjust it. So I'm going to call it, instead of edit form button, I'm going to call it edit HTMX button. It doesn't really matter. This ID doesn't really matter that much. Car ID is going to be the same. The route is going to change. So instead of edit form, I'm going to say edit HTMX. HX target is going to be response. Then just the name here, it's going to be different. It'll be edit via HTMX call. And I'm just going to add one more element called HX swap. That's to replace whatever's in response, to replace the data with whatever's coming from my route. This is an HTMX thing here, HX swap. You can read more about it on the HTMX website. So this should be good to go. So now we have two ways to edit our data, either through forms of Django or through direct HTMX calls. So if I refresh that, you're going to see two buttons here, right? We already tried this one. Let's try this one now. Edit via HTMX call. Click on that. You can see the color is different. That's coming from our different route. Now this looks weird, right? This does not look right. What's going on here? So I probably messed something up. So let me go back to my views. I probably did not close a tag somewhere. Give me 1 second. Okay, it looks like I missed a closing thingy here. So I just need to add this here. All right, so now it should be good. All right, so if we refresh this page, so edit via HTMX, you're going to see all the same kind of thing as the first way we did it, right? But it's just a little bit different. So we're going to say model ABC, right? Let's save that. And it updated it with model ABC, you can see here. I mean, this doesn't look right because it's embedding everything, so we'll need to take a look why it's doing that. But if you go back here, you'll see it's updated. So again, so through a regular form, updates it, or through an HTMX call, updates it as well. It's just that it's embedding everything in here, but you can see it is updating the data as well. So either way you want to do it, this is just kind of to show you different ways to do it. You can either do it using a forms object, which is very easy through Django, or using embedding the data directly, embedding HTML directly into your page. You can do that with HTMX. Okay, so now all our basic database operations are there. Delete, update, create, right? What we're going to do now is add authentication. So we want some users to be able to create, only some users, right? Certain groups, if they're in a, let's say, manager group, you want them to create a record. Otherwise, only display the data. And you want edit to be part of a different group. You want only other groups you wanted to edit, but manager group to create a new record, for example, right? So you want to separate all these functions according to the groups. And also you only want logged in users to be able to do any of these actions, right? If you're not logged in, you can only view read only, for example, right? So you need basic user authentication. So for that, we're going to do Django all auth. So we already installed that package, but if you didn't, make sure you install this package called Django all auth, Django-all auth. Once it's installed, then go to your cars, to your main application, your main project, not the main, but the cars project. Open up settings.py. You only have this single file. That's the only place you have it, so that's really the only file, settings.py, that you have. Open that up. I'm going to add some changes here. For the installed apps, we need to tell Django to also use the all auth app. So we're going to say all auth, comma, and then we're going to add two more. So we're going to say all auth.account, and we're going to say all dot social account. So we need all three of these to be present in this installed apps directive. These three right here. Otherwise, auth is not going to work. So let's go to middleware. So here it'll be security middleware, session middleware, common CSR view, authentication, messages, X-frame, and then on the bottom, all the way in the bottom, we want to add our all auth middleware. So you're going to say all auth dot account dot middleware dot account middleware. You just need to insert this line here. So it's installed apps you're adding, and also middleware. Okay, so let's go down a bit. Templates, this should be okay. Let me see what else we need to add here. You can kind of look through all these options. This is your database definition. So here's where you would update it if you have Postgres, but we're just going to leave this for SQLite. That's what we're using. It also has a couple of cool features for your password validator. So if a user signs up for your website, you want them to have minimum length and all these different rules, like the password should be more than, let's say, 12 characters, right? So let's do that now. So we'll say when a user signs up, we want the password to be minimum length of 12, right? So for that, we're going to say options. And options, we're going to say min length 12. So anytime they sign up, if their password is less than 12 characters, reject that. Okay, there's a bunch of other options you can, if you look through the Django docs for validators, you can add a bunch of cool stuff here, like you know, combination of letters, numbers, symbols, that kind of stuff. Let me see, this authentication backends. Okay, so let's go to authentication backends. Did I miss it? I think we need to create a new directive called authentication backends. All right, let's go all the way to the bottom. We're going to type in authentication underscore backends equals django.contrib.auth.backends.model backend. So this is standard Django authentication backend. And we're going to add allauth.account.auth underscore backends.authentication backend. It's a lot of typing, but you only need to do this once, so it's you don't need to do this more than this. Okay, let's see. All right, so now let's create a couple of options for allauth. So number one is login redirect URL. So when a person logs into your website, redirect them to the index, right? So slash means go to the homepage index. If you want, for example, land them on a different page, let's say like a welcome page, you can do welcome, but you need to create a route for that, right? So like welcome.html or something like that. For now, we're going to leave index. Also the same thing for logout. I'm going to also say index, but you can do like a logout.html if you want, like, thank you for visiting our website, that kind of stuff. We're going to create a site ID. So allauth has this concept of sites. So if you have multiple websites, kind of multiple locations where your site is running on, here we're just going to say site ID 1. It's a very simple use case. Another thing is we're going to say email backend. So Django comes with all these different email engines. For now, because we're testing, we're going to say Django core.mail.backends.console.email backend. So what this means is anytime Django sends an email, so in this case, when a user registers with our website, Django is going to send out like a string of characters to confirm their email account. So normally, you know, you would have like an actual email backend, like a Gmail or whatever, Postfix or whatever you're using, to send like a registration email to that user. But here, because we're testing, it's like a demo site, we're going to use a console email backend, so meaning it's going to print out that link to our console. um, we're going to tell all auth to use an email as our authentication method. So out of the box, Django authentication uses a username, but that's pretty outdated. Nobody really uses that anymore. Like, you know, Superman user or whatever. People can just create usernames, but we don't want to use that. We want to use a person's email account as their username. So we're going to say account authentication method equals email. We also want it to be required. So we want a person to enter their email to authenticate, right? We don't want anybody without an email to be able to log into this website. We also want account email confirmation expire days. So, for example, when Django sends a registration email, like, hey, here's a link to complete your registration, we want it to expire in a certain number of days, right? So if they click it 6 days from now, then that link is not valid anymore. And we also want a verification of their account. So we want a user to be verified by Django that they clicked on the link from Django to register. We're going to say account email verification equals mandatory. So a user has to register with Django and verify that their email is correct. So it's just typical, you know, site registration stuff. So anytime you visit some site, you want to register for the site, you know how it is. It sends you a link to your email. You go to your email, you click on that link, and now you're verified. Like, yeah, okay, that's a legit email. And also we're going to say account username required equals false. So we're not going to use username, we're just going to use email as your login. And then we're going to say account login attempts limit equals 5. So when they try to log in, if they log in more than 5 times, we're going to log their account, right? Otherwise it's a spam, somebody's trying to log in. We want to limit that. Okay, so this is set, and it's a lot of stuff here, but it's really a one-time setup. You just need to configure these directives, and then your authentication mechanism is good to go. Okay, so now that we added this, you can see that Django gives you a message here. You have 10 unapplied migrations. So what Django is saying is, hey, I know you want to use all-auth, but I need to create tables, database tables for this all-auth application to store all that data. You need to create a migration, meaning you need to create these tables, right? So we're going to do that. We're going to say manage.py, make migrations, and then migrate. And you can see here it just created these database tables. These are all auth tables. So if you open up your database, you're going to see a bunch of new tables here. They're all empty though, right? We didn't register anybody. Okay, so this is done. Okay, now we just need to do one more thing. If we go back here and go to your admin console. Oh, I need to start my run server. So you can see there's a bunch of new data that was added. So here's your accounts and your social accounts. So for social accounts, you don't need to worry about that for now. And then what we would need to do is register our all-auth site. So site ID equals 1. Just one more thing I need to add. Under the installed apps directive, under the social account, you just want to add one more thing here. That's the sites. So we're going to say django.contrib.sites. Save that, and then we just need to re-migrate that. Let me see. If anytime you encounter these migration issues, what you can also do is delete your previous migration. Run it again. Let's see what's going on. So because I don't have much data here, what I'm going to do is just delete everything from this table. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this entire database and rebuild it. Oh, give me a second. So delete the database, and also I'm going to delete the everything in the migration folder and recreate the entire thing. There it is. Okay, so it recreated the entire database, and you should have a Django site, which is what we want. Now, if we go to here to the admin console, oops, let me run my server. Restart that. Login is my admin account. Oh, I need to recreate my super user. I deleted my database. So I'm going to recreate that. So manage.py, create super user, admin. I'm going to leave that email for now blank. Okay, so I just created my admin account. Oh, did I forgot to run my server again. There we go. Okay, cool. So now that you have your sites, if you go to your sites table, so again, all this data you see here, these are just your database tables, right? Click on the sites table. So we're going to modify that. So domain name, for the domain name, you wanted to put in, if it's an actual live website, like cars.com or something like that, whatever your website is. Here we're going to put localhost just because we're testing. Display name, we're going to call it cars. It doesn't matter, but call it whatever you want. We're going to save that. Okay. Now if we go back to our page, no search table main cars. I did not create cars. Let's take a look. Why not? Main.cars. That's interesting. It did not create our alright, let's take a look why it's not doing that. So I'm going to try to make migrations main, our main app. So I want to create that cars table. So let's do that. Sometimes you need to tell a specific application to migrate. So I'm going to do migrate. There it is. So it did create main. Let me just double check, make sure our database shows our cars table. Main cars. There it is. Okay, cool. So let's run our server again. Okay. Server is running. Okay, we don't have a record yet, so we can create a record just to test for now. Okay, so there we go. We're back in action. So we do have a record. So now that we do have authentication enabled. Right now we don't have authentication on this template, right? So it's open to anybody. So what we're going to do is we're going to lock down this the routes to authenticated users only, right? So the way to do it is we go back to our views, and index we want to be open to anybody, even non-logged in people, because we want non-logged in people to see read-only data of our cars. For things like delete, right, we want only logged in users to be able to delete data. So we need to add a decorator called login required. And I need to import that. So let me go back up here. Just going to add an import. So from Django.contrib.auth.decorators, import login required. Okay, so now anybody that tries to delete, they're going to have to be authenticated first. And same thing for edit. We want to lock all these views down to logged in users, right? So it's the same thing. We're gonna add login required decorator. So these are all locked down, right? So if I go back here, refresh that. See, these are still open, right? So it is showing I am logged in as a super user admin. That's why you're seeing all these buttons available. Now, if I were to open up a brand new site as a non-logged in user, I still see it. So what's the problem here? So the problem is because my HTML template is showing this regardless, is showing the buttons regardless of my logged in status, but you notice that if I click on that, it doesn't do anything. Like, it doesn't actually delete it. Like, it'll make the call to our backend to delete, but the call is not going anywhere because Django is rejecting the call because of our login required. So what we want to do is first we want to remove these buttons from the template to make sure non-logged in users can't even see the buttons, right? Because it's confusing. Even when they click on it, it's confusing. It doesn't do anything. Another thing I want to do is add a sign in button and a sign out button and a register button. So we're going to do that right now. So first let's add the sign in button. So let's open up the index template. And over here we're going to say if user is authenticated, display a message like hello user, username, right? Hello whoever you are. So we're going to say if user.is authenticated, we're going to say hello user, how you doing user? Okay, let's test that out, right? So just a very simple template update, and then you'll see over here, if I refresh that, it knows I'm logged in as an admin, right? Now let's add a menu so the user can sign out, log out, right, and sign in. So let's go back here. We're going to add a menu here. So we're going to say if user is authenticated, give them an option to log out, right? So we're going to say li ahref, and then we're going to send them to a route called logout. So we're going to say URL account logout, and this is we don't need to create this this function because this is part of all-auth. It comes built in with once you install it and configure it. We're going to say logout. Okay, so he's going to have a button called UL. So the user is going to have a button called logout, or a link called logout. Then we're going to say else. If user is not authenticated, we're going to add a button called login or sign in. And here it's going to be account login. Okay. This HTML is really ugly, but whatever. Okay, close the if statement. So with Jinja, you have to close your statements, right? So if you do an if, you have to do it with an end if. It's really kind of verbose, but it works. Okay, so now let's go back to our site. Account logout is not found. Account logout is not found. Why is it not found? Let me double check my URLs. And the reason is we need to add a catch all off route. So if you open up your URLs, over here we're just going to add one more route, and that's going to be like a catch all for all the authentication stuff. We're going to say path accounts / So anything with accounts / that means all auth. Include all auth.urls. Okay. All right, so let's refresh that. All right, so see, it sees that now. Let me just add a line break, otherwise it's confusing. Let me see. I'll put one over here, like that. Okay, so it's much better now. So hello admin. Oh, you're logged in? Okay, so click on the logout. So once I click on this logout, it'll take me to a logout page, which is directly coming from all auth. I did not need to create this page. This whole page exists as part of the package, right? So if I click on sign out, I am signed out. So you can see here that my login is not there anymore. So now I have to log in, right? So if I click on log in, I have to log in as a user. Now, I did not create an email address as part of my super user. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new user with an email address, right? So here's how the sign up registration process works. When you click on sign up, it'll take you to an all auth registration page. So here I'm going to give it a name called admin@admin.com. I'm going to do a password. As you can see, it needs at least 12 characters. Remember, we added that rule in the settings.py. So I'm going to say, I'm going to use some password that's over 12 characters. Okay, so now it's going to say verify your email address. So what Django is going to do is send an email link to that admin@admin.com address, that fake address I put in. Now, to see that link, we go back to our process, and you can see here, this is Django, that email backend that we looked at earlier. It's just basically dumping everything to the console, right? You can see the message that all auth is sending. Hello from Cars, you're receiving this email because user blah 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 has given your email address to register account on your domain. So this is our domain name. To confirm this is correct, go to this link, right? So it just generates a link for you. So everything's already built in for you. It's very nice. All I got to do is just copy that, open up a new tab, put that in. Now look what happens. Confirm that that's your address, right? So let's say that this is my real address. I'm going to confirm that. So now I'm verified, right? So if I log in an admin@admin.com with my long password that I just registered, I'm going to click sign in. And look at that. It generates a username for me. And then now I'm logged in. So now look, if I do this, this works. It's pretty nice, right? So I can also create new records. So pretty nice. So everything is there. Now, just to keep in mind, if you want to edit, for example, customize these pages. So when you click on logout, right, this page right here, it's kind of ugly, right? If you want to customize it with your custom design, custom CSS, whatever you want to do, all you need to do is under your templates, create a new folder called account. And then here, what you want to do is create a new file. So for example, login.html, and then give it some give it your custom CSS, your login information. Now, if you don't know what fields to use, what you can do is this. This is a little trick, but when you install Django-allauth, it'll install the package. Now, if you use pipenv, it'll install it to a specific folder. So, for example, mine is going to be under local, share virtual envs. It's going to be cars, and then some number. This is all coming from
pipenv, but if you use, like, for example, virtual env or poetry, it'll be some other location. Basically anywhere where your virtual environment manager installs your packages to. It'll be under lib, Python, whatever Python version you're using, side packages, and it's going to be called all-auth, right? And under all-auth, you're going to see a folder called templates. Under account, you're going to see a bunch of files here, right? So for example, if you want to customize your logout message, all you got to do is just copy that logout HTML to your main templates account folder. So see, I just copied that right there. Let me delete that previous one. So this is the one I just copied it. So you can see this is coming from all-auth package, right? Now here, if I want to add some custom, this is custom message, right? So you can add your custom stuff to this page. Now if I go to the sign out logout page, if I refresh that, you can see my custom stuff is coming through, right? So this is a way to customize all these pages that are coming from all-auth. So it's just a little trick if you're trying to figure out how to do it. I did that before. You can make it look pretty and add your CSS and look all nice and all that other stuff. Maybe add some menu, all that other stuff. Okay, so now authentication is working. Now the last part is I want to segregate certain things. So I want only users inside of a certain group to be able to, let's say, create records, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out, and I'm going to create a new user or register a new user. I'm going to call it manager@manager.com. Let's say this is going to be our manager user. Now what I'm going to do is only managers will be able to create new records. Everybody else can delete and edit, for example, right? Oops, my password did not match. Okay, so again, I'm going to verify my address by copying this string. Confirm that. Okay, so now I have manager, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in as my super user under admin. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new group. So before we do that, so if you look on your users, you're going to see there's a couple of users created. So this is my super user, and it's a little bit confusing. Let's call this one maybe not admin. Let's call this guy, let's change the name, right? Let's call it, I don't know, employee. Joe Schmo, whatever it is, whatever you want to call this guy. But this guy is going to be able to delete and edit, right? So I'm just going to save this record. And then our manager, I want only the manager to be able to create new records, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new group called managers. And I'm going to give it some permission. So for example, managers can create new cars. So for example, under main cars, I'm going to say can add cars. Okay. I'm going to save that. And then go back to users and click on manager. And I'm going to add him to the group. So I'm going to add this manager to the managers group. Click save. So now manager is part of the managers group. You can see here. So now I need to tell the logic here that only managers can create accounts. So to do that, we're just going to need to update our our index HTML here, right? So for example, these buttons should only be visible by signed in people. And also this part here where we create new record can only be visible to users that are part of the managers group. Okay, so first let's take care of the buttons. We want to make sure these buttons are not visible to non-signed in users. So it's very simple to do, right? We just go here, we're going to say if user is authenticated. And all these buttons go into that if statement. So let me just go back here, put this TD up, and close my if statement. And if, okay, so that takes care of the user. So let's test that, right? So if we go back here, let me open up a incognito window. So you can see those buttons are gone because I'm not logged in, right? This is still available though. So I don't want this to be available either. So let's go back. And for this whole thing, we're going to say, this whole part we're creating new records, we're going to say if managers are in group list. And group list is a data structure we're going to pass to this template. So we're going to say, we're going to give a variable called group list, and if managers is in there, then make this whole thing available to the user. And to do that, we're going to go open up our views, go to your index view, all the way on top. And what I want to do is, under the cars query set, I'm going to create a new group list. So I'm going to say group list equals list. It's an array or a list. Request.user.groups.values underscore list. And we're going to say name. So this whole thing is coming from Django. So anytime you log in or you do any kind of request, Django sends a bunch of data with that request. For example, who's the user making that request, right? If I'm logged in, it's going to give you, it can send you all kinds of information about whoever's making that request, including that person's groups. And here I'm just going to add flat equals true, just to flatten out the data. And one last thing is, under contacts, I'm going to add group list. I'm going to pass this list to the template. Okay, so now this thing is getting its group list as well, right? So under index, if managers is in group list, show this whole new record section, right? So if I go back to my incognito window, refresh that, it's gone, right? So this is what we want, read only completely. Hey, I'm not logged in, right? Now if I log in, let's say I log in as a admin at admin.com, meaning somebody who can only edit and delete records but not create new records, right? There it is, right? I can only edit and delete, but I cannot create, right? That's what we want. Now if I'm going to log out, I'm going to log in as a manager now, and a manager should be able to create a new record. So I'm going to say manager at manager.com. And you can see manager has access to all this, right? Because manager is part of that group. So this shows you how to control access to your data, to your functions, to your routes, everything according to your authentication, how you're authenticated. We can even limit this down to certain groups as well. So for example, if you don't want managers to be able to delete, you can also add that as well. But as you can see, you can control everything through group lists, and you get the group lists through this function here. So that wraps it up. There's a lot more we could go through, including like how to add CSS, JavaScript, all this other stuff. Just wanted to keep it kind of simple, but all the stuff is available on the GitHub repo in the comments under the video. If you have any questions, shoot me a response on YouTube. I'll try to get to it. Anyway, hope this helps, and yeah, enjoy Django, enjoy HTMX, give them a like, It's a great tool, great tools, and all right, good luck.